All right, let's call the meeting to order. Do we have any announcements? No, okay, that's easy. Minutes.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Report on council actions.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I've only got a couple of public hearings that went before you and then went on to City Council. So the first one was a development agreement modification, and that is for Middlebury subdivision, and that was approved. So that pretty large subdivision is moving forward now. And then the other one was an annexation and zoning to RS6 for a single-family home on Middleton Road, 1028 Middleton Road, and that got approved as well. There were a couple of variances. One was for a 15-foot landscape buffer, and that one got approved. The other one was for requiring mechanical units protruding from the roof to be screened from public view, and proposing to paint them the same color, and that got approved as well. That
For the
was
school?
for the Idaho Arts
Okay.
Charter School. And then we had a bunch of ordinances read, so they've just gone through. That just completes the process. The Vintage Rose, that was a comp plan amendment, and that got approved. And
Wedding venue?
yep, that was the wedding venue. And then the storage units off of, I think it's South Side and Locust for Linda Claiborne. That was read as well. And then there was a couple of vacations that you weren't involved but there were some easements that needed to be vacated. And then first reading of the annexation and zoning to RS7 for East Canyon Elementary, that was approved as well. And then the first reading of the ordinance for another vacation. So I think that's all of the things we had at the last city council meeting.
Any feedback from their last meeting on the comments that were made? I've heard a lot of people talking about it. I didn't know what it is.
Oh, you mean about the comments that were made at city council? Nothing yet. I'm interested to see how this next city council meeting goes. It won't be till September 7th. Is that right? I think it's September 7th. But yeah, there's been a lot of comments in the paper about what was said, and so
People are talking all
interested to hear how it goes, what they say.
All right. Okay, we have business item, Christie.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So this is a request for a 6-month extension for the Kinghorn Place subdivision number 2. They are requesting an extension due to some delays that they've experienced, but they intend to record in October. The project is made up of 15.29 acres, proposed to be platted into 58 buildable lots and 4 common lots in an RS7 zone on Northside Boulevard. The original expiration date was July 21st of 2021, and with your approval would be extended to January 21st of 2022. Staff recommends approval of this extension with all conditions that were required with the previous approval. And I will stand for any questions.
Any questions for Christie? What do you guys want to do?
6 months will be February 30th. 31st?
No, it's January 21st. It's going to be from the July date.
Okay. January 21st?
Yes, 2022.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve the 6-month extension request for Kinghorn Place subdivision with all conditions of staff already, and all conditions already in place till January 21st, 2022.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the extension. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, and we got 6 minutes till 7, so we'll hold off on public hearings until that time.
Peggy. Since these are both city-related things.
I'll make that motion.
Yeah, that's right by me.
Thinking the same thing. Get them out of here.
Well. Let them get out of here.
Maybe they want to sit through it all. Who
Yeah.
knows?
But more than likely not. No, it wasn't her idea now.
Good read. Kind of wondering going. Oh, yeah. Figured you've seen it by now. We're gonna move the last one up to the first. So they can, evidently that's
So
what
they
they're
can
all,
bring a sample.
evidently that's what they're all here for. I imagine there's anybody here for the other.
Make sure they have the samples before.
Yeah.
The samples don't move it.
What?
All here for that.
Oh. You want to write it down? You want to text me? You know, make them wait in agony?
He doesn't want it in writing.
Oh, he's just catching up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's just catching up.
The news was watching it.
Yeah. Of course, that on the news, yeah.
It is.
It is, yes.
Especially when it's council. Just doing it, Dick. Oh. No, it's not. right on.
I got 2 minutes, yeah.
Daniel, our clock is wrong. Will you fix that?
You're an engineer, fix it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. No doubt. Okay, that works for me.
No doubt.
Change the clock?
To move number 3 up, number 1.
Get Daniel a ladder so he can reach the clock.
It was Jeff's idea.
No.
Was it Adam's? Oh, sorry. Well, Adam, there you go.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we move item 3 to item 1 on our agenda today.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to move public hearing number 3 to number 1. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Probably should ask the applicant if they do want to go first.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so we can start. So do we have the applicant for the Swirl Wine Shop? Unless you want to stay and listen to everything else.
I could change it.
Yeah, here we go.
Parker could reach it.
All right, so first time doing this, so,
Don't worry about it.
Give us your name and address.
okay,
And then tell us what you want to do.
all right. So, Andrew Medina, and then the address is 116 13th Avenue South, downtown Nampa, in the Historic District. Wanting to do is wine shop and lounge. I think, looking at what downtown Nampa is doing right now, it's actually an amazing thing. I was just down there right now, checking it out, and the vibe is great. I think the wine industry out here in Idaho has been growing like crazy. A lot of traffic, a lot of tourism. I think Nampa is ready for a wine shop. Also, on 13th Street, I'm kind of excited to go down on 13th Street just because First Street's getting a lot of attention. And I feel like 13th is an area downtown that just needs to pop. And I feel like my business, future businesses coming in, that want to come in, are going to help that. And I'm really excited to see movement from First Street to 13th. I feel like my wine shop will help that as well, plus some of the other smaller businesses across the street that I've been talking to. Other than that, again, Idaho wine region's been growing like crazy. The downtown needs this. Looking to help other businesses grow. I'm very big on local. We are going to be catering a lot to the Idaho wine industry as well. So pretty much it.
Okay.
Is that good?
All right. And if we have any questions after we hear from
Okay.
staff and public testimony, we'll call you back up.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The action requested for approval or denial of conditional use permit. This is classified as a bar / nightclub / tavern / cocktail lounge.
All right.
That's a slash.
The zoning is DH, that's downtown historic. Some of the surrounding land uses across the street is Cafe de Coco. There's various retail spaces around to the east. Next door, previously was Luna Blue. To the west is the Bell Event Center. Previous tenants at this location, Found About Vintage, Salon Chez, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that. Neighboring Luna Blue was approved for a conditional use permit back in 2003. Here's the street view, showing the location. I think we're all know the conclusions of law for conditional use permit, so I want to cover that. It's in your staff report. Correspondence, Title IV for Building Department. They also request that they apply for a change of occupancy building permit. certificate of occupancy. Same condition for fire department. The correspondence from the BID, Business Improvement District, they strongly support the conditional use permit request. They state believes a small business will be a great addition to the community. It's our view that this use type fits well for our historic downtown, and their presence will bring in additional customers to area businesses while maintaining a family-friendly environment. We also received several other comments in favor from the general public. These were received today and yesterday, so they weren't included in the staff report for you. We can read through them if you request. I believe most of these people are here tonight. They were all in favor, basically stating that the downtown needs an addition like this, and that it'll bring vitality to the area. Staff analysis, it's downtown. The nearest church is 0.2 miles away, nearest school is 0.4 miles away. They're transferring the alcohol license from Luna Blue. The applicant states in their narrative, the whole goal is to bring more wine options to the downtown area. The off-street parking, there's no required, number of spaces required in the DH zone. Conditions of approval are those in the staff report, as well as any that you would wish to add. And there's a potential motion for you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Quick question, Parker. Did the Nampa Police Department have any comment on this?
There were no comments from the police department.
Questions for Parker? Okay, we'll open the public hearing. I have the sign-up sheet. We only have people for the proposal signed up. And you don't have to speak unless you want to. You will get on the record as being for the proposal. Jeannie Hetrick, would you like to speak? Okay, come up and give us your name and address for the record.
I could not change the clock. My name is Jeannie Hetrick. I live out in Caldwell, actually. And my address is 14168 Plum Road, Caldwell, Idaho. So I met Andrew about 6 years ago when the wine industry out in my area off of Sunny Slope just went crazy. And mostly I'm here just to support him as a person. He's just done a phenomenal job out there. He is a native of Idaho, and I know he is very strongly in favor of trying to get more of our Idaho wines out amongst the community in some of our nicer restaurants and restaurants as options. And I know that by doing this, he's going to give my friends and myself another nice place to go out on date night. And I know he will grow our industry even more. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have Brandy and Richard Britell. Okay, and you're on the record as 4. Colleen George. Okay. And then Tim Wrangler. He's gonna keep jumping up.
Absolutely. Tim Wangler, 217 14th Avenue South, right here in Nampa. My wife and I, right there, are the owners of VCA Cigar Lounge in downtown Nampa. So I'll just be brief. I want to talk about Andrew as a person and a manager, and then downtown Nampa. So we first met Andrew at Hat Ranch Winery a couple years ago. He is professional. He is respectful to all the customers and extremely knowledgeable about his wine. He comes in and makes deliveries for us. Always willing to talk to customers, extremely respectful, very kind. Andrew actually hired one of my employees. This particular employee came from high-end restaurants in San Francisco. She glowed about Andrew as a boss. He does not suffer fools gladly. He doesn't put up with tomfoolery. When the clock is on and you're working, it's time to work. So he does not mess around. Second, let's talk about downtown Nampa a little bit. People have asked me if I think this is competition. I do not. I live by a philosophy that when the tide rises, all boats float. And so this is great for downtown Nampa to have a classy place, dress nice, take your wife, take your significant other. It's better for downtown businesses to have more places like this versus some of the other stuff that we've got floating around. So we completely 100% support this, and we need more of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's nobody else signed up to speak, but if you're here and you would like to speak, now is your chance. Okay. Anybody have any questions for the applicant? Do we need him back up here? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed.
Congratulations.
We haven't voted yet. We haven't voted yet.
We're not done.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, we approve the conditional use permit for a bar / nightclub / tavern / cocktail lounge in a DH zoning district at 116 13th Avenue South for Swirl Wine Shop and Lounge for Andrew Medina with all conditions of staff.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the CUP. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
There you
Okay.
go.
Okay, it's approved, and I got to read this to you now. Okay, this CUP will become effective 15 calendar days from the date of this hearing unless an appeal has been filed with the Planning and Zoning Department with the appropriate fee. No action should be taken on this CUP until the appeal period has concluded. The applicant must confirm with Planning and Zoning staff there have been no appeals. But I want to come down there as soon as you open. Excited to have more downtown. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is gonna be good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, now we got rid of all our audience. Okay, we'll see how fast Christie can be. No? Oh, Rodney first. I'm just going backwards order all of a sudden.
Keep Rodney here quiet.
Yeah, we'll make Rodney go last, and you guys can leave.
Can you switch over to? Thank you. This is a big event for us, actually. Rodney Ashby. I know. We've worked on this project for a long time, put in a lot of hours, many of us extra hours to make this happen. So the proposal for you today is a recommendation of approval to City Council of the zoning text amendment of Title 10, Planning and Zoning Chapters 1 through 34. And I'm not going to go over all of the changes because there's a lot and very, very extensive. But I thought I'd give you a quick history about where we came from and maybe for the record so that this is on record what happened. In 2019, we contracted with Hamilton and Hilty, Michelson and Hilty, to do these code updates. And the intent was to provide some clarity, get rid of some of the bulk of the zoning code, make it more readable. And I would just say that the people who put this code together, specifically one person who put this code together over the years, it was responding to changes over time. And no fault of his, this code became complex and a little bit wordy and hard to interpret for the public and for even staff. And so this is why we started this. However, after jumping into the code updates, we found that there were a lot of policy changes that needed to be made, not just the clarity. And so we began changing policies. And in 2021, there were so many going on and so much input was needed from the city and city leadership that we had to take it on fully. So my staff put in a lot of effort to make these changes and come up with ideas for how to respond to your questions and your ideas and City Council's direction as well. And so that's what we did. And I'm just really proud of my team who did this. In April of 2021, we had a workshop with Nampa City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission. We got through 3 of the 34 chapters. There was a lot in those first 3 chapters, and we were given a lot of direction, and we made a lot of changes. Following the meeting, we sent out videos of each of the chapters with additional changes that we had recommended. We met again in June of 2021 with a virtual workshop with City Council and this body, and presented the changes that we'd made. And we also received some direction from the Commission and City Council to make additional changes. And so I have multiple changes for you tonight to consider. But we have brought forward everything that the council and the commission has directed us to do, except for the things that I need input on tonight. So I'm not going to go over all those details. I do have a summary of all of those. If you have questions about one specific chapter or one specific topic, I can go to that summary pretty easily. It's PDF per chapter. But other than that, I will move on to applicable regulations. In order for a zoning text amendment to happen, it needs to be found that it's reasonably necessary in the interest of the public and in harmony with the goals and or policies of the adopted comprehensive plan. We believe these do that. Okay, so the first question that came up from City Council primarily, and I think some from the commission, but was about this live-work buildings in the city of Nampa. Why don't they pencil out for, or why haven't they penciled out in the past? And what do other communities do? So we went to each of those communities and asked them what their input was, what's happening there. And we found that Meridian said they have very few live-work buildings where it's both employment and living in that building. They had very few, but they said there's recently been an interest, more of an interest. In Eagle, very few and only small live-work situations, so small developments, but recently had more interest. Boise, primarily located in downtown and Bound Crossing, which were high-value properties, where they felt like the value of the property allowed them, or the desirability of the property allowed them to charge higher rents to compensate the cost of paying the higher value tax rate for commercial. And that's actually what is happening here. Canyon County and Ada County said that when a mixed-use building gets taxed, it's taxed with commercial, regardless of how much residential is there. Caldwell, there was a specific question about one of the projects in Caldwell, and I'll get to that, but they said the same thing, very few live work with a lot of interest coming up just recently. The Pennywise project, which was referenced at our meeting, it combines nonprofit medical services on the ground floor of a building and subsidized residential 55 plus on top floors. All of these are nonprofit, and property taxes are not relevant in this situation. So that's how that penciled out. Okay, so it appears that because residential property values have significantly increased, the difference between tax rates for residential versus commercial isn't a significant barrier to building mixed-use buildings. Likely, the biggest barrier is developer experience and willingness to build a mixed-use building. We're seeing more interest now than we ever have in this mixed-use concept. So I imagine that we're gonna see more of these in the future. Okay. So that was just a question. I don't know if you have any comments or questions for me following our research on that topic. Okay, I'll move on. So the proposed changes, I already talked about some of this, but we did also include formatting. We did a lot of flipping things around, categorizing things so that it's just more readable. We improved clarity, and last of all, we had policy changes. And there were significant numbers of policy changes, which I will highlight the ones that have happened since the last workshop. So the first one of these is Chapter 1, which includes a lot of our definitions. And we removed accessory dwelling attached definition to ensure no duplex through single utility. Oh, and we will ensure that no duplex will occur through single utility, mailbox, and address on a property. So the idea here is that we've been thinking of these in-laws quarters that are attached, and we've been regulating that to say you have one room, one bathroom, and you have to have a passageway between the house and you can have an exterior access to that section. The more these came in, the more I was like, I don't know how to distinguish just an addition of a house from a in-laws quarters that is attached to the house. It just seems like it could be another bedroom for more children or whatever. There was no way to distinguish that, and we don't go into the homes and check that that's being done. So it didn't make sense for me to include this or keep this in our code. We'll regulate that through making sure there's not a second address, not a second mailbox, and no second utilities on the property. So if you're okay with that, I will move forward. Okay. The next one is 10.1.10. Home occupations currently indoors only in the code, and we are proposing to allow side and rear yard if screened from view. And the concerns regarding in home occupations are in the past have been, well, is it going to be noisy? Are they going to be sawing and building things in their backyard? Well, we have a noise ordinance in the police section of our city code, and that still applies. So if there's smells and nuisances, there's also a nuisance ordinance. So I couldn't see a reason to not allow this if it's screened from the neighbor's view with a fence and it's in the side or rear yard. So that's the proposal tonight, which is different than what we've said in the past.
Rodney, I got
Yeah.
something on that one. Towards the bottom of that paragraph, you have if a renter or homeowner receives their mail at the property, has their trash picked up, blah, 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 and then has their homeowner's exemption assigned to that property. If it's a renter, there's not going to be homeowner exemption assigned to that property, so shouldn't that be removed?
Does it say and or?
It doesn't say and or that I read. It just says, it has a list of all the things that need to be going to this property. I think that's just an example showing ownership. Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted that to be clear, because
Yeah,
if it's a
thank
renter
you.
there, it's not gonna be a homeowner
True.
exemption attached to that property, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then the last section the last thing that we changed since the last workshop on 10.1.10 is that the current code does not allow group instruction. So we ran into this where people were doing, gonna do swimming lessons in our pool, right? Well, is that a home occupation? Is it something that only one individual person can come at a time? The code didn't allow that. So we made some exceptions. We proposed some exceptions to allow group instruction of up to 6 people. If it's large amounts of people, then you get concerns about traffic and about parking out in front of a home. So there is also a requirement that the director could require up to 2 additional parking spaces that are dedicated just for that purpose if it becomes an issue. So that's the proposal on
They
that.
have more than 6. I know an individual who does swimming lessons in her backyard, and I think she's got more than 6. Would they need?
At one time?
Yeah, would they need an exception to that?
So, I mean, I guess they'd have to have
Would
a
it be a-
variance
Would it,
for
a variance then?
that.
Okay.
Mhm. or you, we were just coming up with numbers, trying to manage the traffic in that area. So if you have a better suggestion for additional, we could take that to council and have them consider it too. Uh-huh. I don't know if you heard that, but 6 is the limit for daycare as well.
And with that, they would have to come in for a CUP then, right?
Right.
After more than 6?
Right, for
So
the
that would be the
daycare.
same process for anything outdoors as a
Yeah,
occupation?
so it'd be you'd have to get a variance, which is similar, except that it goes to city council instead of this body. Yeah,
Why would it be different if it was a
because we have already outlined that in code that above 6 is actually a commercial daycare. It takes more review than just a simple home occupation. So we haven't put that into our code for like swim lessons or a little soccer team or whatever. So if they were ever to be able to do that, they'd have to get a variance from what the code says. Or we change the code and make some exceptions here. You know.
Rodney?
Yeah.
Somewhere, and couldn't even tell you where, but somewhere in my neighborhood, there was a bunch of teenagers, must be teenagers, that have a band. And they practice in somebody's garage, I guess. I don't know. I just hear the music, but I can't tell you where it's coming from.
Okay.
But I'm sure it would violate the noise ordinance. But how do you figure out where the people are? I mean, I've been hearing this for a year, and I can't even figure out where the heck they live.
Good question. I would drive around until you hear the greatest noise. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the only way you would be able to do that.
That would be, if it violated the noise.
If it violated
65.
If it violated the noise ordinance, then the police department would get involved.
Their property line.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
You're past your 10 minutes.
I know. Chapter 2 is enforcement, and we made a small change here just to match the state code for how often you can make a comprehensive plan map amendment or text amendment. And that simply makes it possible for anybody to do it at any time. We don't feel like we get enough of those, but the intention of that, the reason originally it was created in the state was that they wanted to make the comp plan really lasting. So you have a lot of stability, you can count on that comp plan staying around for a long time. We just haven't seen that much of an interest in changing the comp plan willy-nilly, making the smallest little changes. It's usually well thought out, and we don't have a frequent request for comp plan amendments. So we recommended just matching the state code. All right, Chapter 3, there's significant changes here. The first one is multifamily near single-family residential has been challenging, as we mentioned in the workshop, because compatibility is really difficult to deal with as these large multifamily developments occur next to a single-family subdivision. It creates compatibility issues, and we get a room full of people here. And so we were trying to think about how we might address that, and we originally suggested a max of 30 feet in height, which could be a 3-story apartment or multifamily building. And that would be for only those areas in town that are in the BC, the Community Business Zoning District, that are away from our major corridors. And I've listed those corridors up on the screen there. City Council, however, in the meeting was concerned about the impact on the ability to build multifamily around the community. And they asked us to look at what other communities have done. And the following is what we have found. I'm not going to go over all of these, but essentially it comes down to that Treasure Valley cities have created commercial sub-districts to scale down building heights near residential development. Nampa Code does the same with the BN, or the Neighborhood Business Zone, and the RP, Residential Professional Zoning Districts. However, there are locations around the community that were created as BC in kind of residential areas because of those commercial nodes we used to have on the comprehensive plan. And it was just this little node that you could move around to a corner near a intersection. And so we have these BC zones, and they don't have that height restriction. And so just based on this and based on looking at other communities and how they've done this, we still recommend that away from our major corridors, that the height be limited to 3 stories or 30 feet. And appreciate your input on that.
Can you flip back to the major corridors?
Yep.
I mean, I'm okay with this. I just wonder, as much growth as we have going on, how soon will one road become a major corridor? I mean, Happy Valley, for example. I don't see Happy Valley up there. And I know it's a long ways from becoming a major corridor, but it is one of our major north-south routes too, to the freeway. We've had a couple of projects out there that wanted to build that were denied because of placement where they were gonna build. I don't know if there's a way to, I don't know, just a thought.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, one thing I would just say to that is you're limiting the BC zone only, right? So you could put in a RMH zone out there, but the concern has been that we have these little nodes out in the middle of single family that are commercial. They're zoned commercial, and then they come in and maybe propose 5-story buildings, and the next door is a single family home, single level, and it just is kind of inconsistent. So if we designate an area for mixed-use development, and we're doing that primarily, I mean, that's some of our largest areas of developable land right now are mixed use. So if they come in with a pretty significant plan of how they're going to transition between single family, commercial, and then multifamily residential to a higher level, then that's possible, and you can zone it that way. But this was just an attempt to address the BC zone and the concerns.
Well, and these
there.
corridors are commercial corridors too.
They are.
We're not talking about Garrity or not Garrity, but Greenhurst or something like that.
Mhm. Right?
Rodney, what's the zoning right now for where the old hospital used to be?
I believe that is RP, Chrissy? Yeah, RP.
So this wouldn't be impacted by,
No.
and then how much of these corridors is BC?
I could probably show you on my screen. See if I can get there. Okay. So this is Garrity. You can see BC pretty much lines Garrity a lot of the way. This is Franklin, a lot of BC. 11th Avenue. This is 2nd and 3rd, but which is the DHDV and DB. Moves up to Caldwell Boulevard, and most of that is the BC zone all along there. There's just not a lot of developable area, though, along that strip, but if they were to find something, for instance, just as an example, if they were to come out here off of Karcher, and let's say this got redeveloped right here, the old Kmart building, if this got redeveloped and they proposed some multifamily, this would be eligible to go above the 3 stories here. Because, and the idea is it's surrounded by not single-family residential. It's surrounded by other things that don't necessarily conflict. Yeah, right.
It's
And
like those apartments that were proposed behind Karcher
Mall.
208, yeah,
Mhm.
whatever it's called now.
Yep.
Who knows what's going on with that, but even though they back up against, do they back up against residential, or is that?
they do, but that's an RMH zone.
Yeah, okay.
Whatever did happen to those apartments?
I heard just the other day that they're still moving forward. And in fact, I think it's in September that they're proposing to start moving again. So,
Good deal.
yeah. So that, I think that's you're gonna see some changes there pretty soon. So again, the BC zone is what we're concerned about. If you can see some of these areas like this strip here, this is a BC. So it doesn't make sense for us to have a 5-story building next to a single-family residential subdivision, an RS 8.5, which is larger lots right across the street. Doesn't make sense there. Or should it be limited to these more commercial areas? And that was the idea there.
Makes sense.
You probably only really get 2 stories in a 30-foot tall building, right?
Say that again?
You can probably only get 2 stories in a 30-foot tall building.
So when we measure height of a building, we say to the ceiling of the 3rd floor. So it could be 3 stories.
Be like 8 foot, 9, maybe 9-foot ceilings, max.
Mm-hmm.
Flat roof.
Yeah.
Oh, to the top of the
You-
ceiling, then they can slope the roof.
You can slope, yeah, you can still have the roof.
But you need room for HVAC and stuff. Wish the architect was here.
So,
Good, I get it. That's good.
okay, great. And there's the change that we had recommended. I think that's in your packet. All right, 10.3.2, land use table. Tiny houses are only proposed to only be permitted in cottage or cluster subdivisions after a conditional use permit is obtained. That was because we heard some concern about tiny house developments occurring right next to a single-family, really nice, large lot subdivision. And so the idea would be that they'd have to come in with a concept, come in with open space, and then, then city council can approve it or not, and you have a say in the CUP process as well.
That way they can't have 150 tiny homes on 1 square acre or something.
Yeah, exactly. A single tiny house per property may be used as an accessory structure, meaning like an in-laws quarters. That would be an okay fit. And then we removed the zoo designation as permitted in the downtown historic zone.
Rodney, if they use a tiny house for a mother-in-law's quarters, though, you're gonna have a separate power meter.
You could not do that in order to qualify for our code. So you'd have to figure out a way to draw power from the main home to that.
That's doable.
Yeah,
Or the neighbor.
Sewer and power and,
and it'd all be one single utility. Yeah,
it'd be,
yep.
Expensive.
yeah, it'd be easier to add on.
It could be, yep. Okay, removed accessory dwelling attached from the table. We already talked about that. Okay, this next section I need your input on. The downtown BID requested no business with a drive-through be permitted in the downtown historic zone. And then the NDC reviewed that and they came back and said, well, yes, but we would request that banks and credit unions with drive-throughs be permitted in the downtown historic zones. There are some of those down there, but there's a difference in how those two agencies wanted this to change. So I'd appreciate your input for city council on this one.
Is that new taco time in a historic zone
Yes.
with the bank right across the street
Yeah,
in the Arctic Circle?
They'd have to fall under the new code, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
What about drive-through bars? Like COVID? Yeah. But, well, like the other municipalities, because people couldn't sell drinks in bars, they'd say, put it in a drive-through window. And bad idea, in my opinion. Steve's probably like, shut up, what are you doing? But people need to, apparently, some people need to drink every night, so, I don't know.
Night, about every hour.
True.
I think it's a good idea, though, Rodney, about keeping it restricted just banks and savings and loans.
And
One, it's more dangerous because you have people coming in and out. They're always in a hurry at a fast food place to get their food and get out of there and go eat at someplace. So you have people walking downtown, and we're trying to encourage people to walk around downtown, and then we're gonna put a hazard there in front of them that they have to watch out for all the time.
Yeah, and the only input I have on this one is the economic development team just gave me what they believed was the intention of the BID, and it was because they wanted to see the downtown as more pedestrian-friendly rather than car-centric.
It was also highest and best use. We only have so much land down there, so
Yeah.
the drive-through itself takes up more property, more parking potentially, that sort of thing.
But Arctic Circle then would be out of luck on redoing their
Right.
stuff.
I think the BID's understanding was they would be grandfathered, but you're saying if they do a full remodel, it changes the,
Correct.
I don't think that was brought to the meeting.
And we've communicated that to them, though? Can you turn on your mic?
Sorry. They have also considered doing what the Old Town Nampa block is doing and zoning into the neighboring zone, which then would allow this. So they can either rezone or they can get a variance.
Right.
If they had opportunity for a variance, then you can take it case by case.
This is just the historic zone, right? It's not
That's correct.
all of downtown. I think that's, yeah, I think that's good. I don't have any issues.
So is the general direction that the banks and credit unions would still be allowed to have their drive-through?
Yes.
Yeah, and anybody that's already there that has it should be grandfathered in.
So why, the question
They
is,
are in
why
the
that?
city
Why banks and credit unions?
It's already there.
An existing use.
Well, I know,
Well, yeah,
it
but
would have
they
been
wouldn't be-
grandfathered in.
It would be grandfathered in.
But what if another bank wants some, let's just, for example, wants to build a bank in the historic zone, they wouldn't be allowed?
3
As a
drive-through
matter of
lanes in.
fact,
Yes,
the city just recently sold the library parking lot across from the Old Town Nampa, and a bank is looking at it with a drive-through.
So the
So-
exception is not, so the proposed code removes bank and credit unions, but the ones that are already there obviously will be grandfathered
They
in.
would be.
This new code change would eliminate the banks and credit unions, or that's what you're looking for input on? Do we exempt those?
Correct. That's what I'm looking for input on, because the BID had suggested eliminate all ability to put in new drive-throughs. The NDC is saying, well, I think we should make an exception for a bank in the downtown to allow them to have a drive-through.
Is that because NDC sold the land to?
That's exactly where I was going. Thank you, Adam.
I can't speak to that.
But that's the question, though. Why,
Right.
why them? Because it takes up just as much space, if not more, than Arctic Circle drive-through.
And maybe, maybe the downtown, maybe their idea is that, I shouldn't speculate. Let me give my own thought here then. Maybe a downtown is benefited by a large bank coming in with employment and all of that, and so
We
they,
have a lot of banks in downtown.
right.
It's
Some
not
of
gonna
them
be
are
very large bank there.
I'm just looking at other places, like Boise has banks downtown, different, I know it's different, but they have no drive-throughs.
They
Right.
do, in the parking garages.
Not, that Chase Bank downtown, I don't think it has a walk-up,
I don't know about
so it's pedestrian friendly.
KeyBank, Wells Fargo.
I like
US
that.
Bank
They could use
downtown.
it
If
They
they,
could build it if they use the parking garage.
yeah, something like that, but I don't know, I'm a little, I don't know that I would exempt banks and credit unions after this code change. I would just, if we're gonna go with it, just go with it all.
And then let them create a variance if they need it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna get flack.
Yeah.
You're gonna get flack too.
I'm just noting that because that's something I'll have to, we'll have to have as part of the motion tonight. Okay,
Yeah, I just see banks with, I mean, they're gonna have at least 2 or 3 lanes for a drive-through, because one's gonna have an ATM, and the other 2, or at least another one for face-to-face.
I participated with Beth at this meeting, at the land use meeting, and she had said that the bank at that point that was considering downtown was more of a walk-up, community-oriented model and not a drive-through.
Okay.
Which is, I think, what we want down there.
okay, sounds good. Thank you. All right, chapter 15 is the downtown historic zone. And so we had on this one, we originally proposed, the economic development proposed this language where a maximum of 15% of a lot in the downtown may be used for off-street surface parking. And after that was kind of agreed to by the commission and council, I went and spoke with Beth about this, and she and I talked about, well, what does that look like, and what are other communities, what does that percentage look like for other communities? And we found that 15% was extremely low for parking area that could be placed in a downtown lot. So the intent here is for the downtown lots to be primarily used with a building, right, rather than parking area. However, there are some cases where a parking area may be appropriate. And so their recommendation of 15% really eliminated a lot of what we would see in downtown Boise, what we currently see in downtown Nampa today, because it's greater than 15%. And so staff felt that maybe this was too excessive and recommended that this be changed to 50%. But I'm glad to hear your input on this one as well.
Sound like too much. 15 to 50, is that what you're saying?
Mhm.
And just for the historic.
Just for the historic downtown. Mhm. That it can be up to 50% for parking, off-street parking.
You know, the parking garage itself, the whole top floor is barricaded off. You can't even use it. I mean, there's plenty of spaces. You just have to walk 2 blocks. Why do we have to keep on putting in more parking spaces? Let's use the ones we got. We got along Front Street, there's all that parking back out there on Front Street. It's only 2 blocks off. People can't walk 2 blocks, then they have a problem.
They won't visit their business.
One thing that I would note is that the way that our downtown is set up, any parking that would be happening on the lots that isn't there today would end up being off the alleys. We wouldn't, with the on-street parking that's there currently, we wouldn't, I don't see us allowing that to be taken out to put it parking in on site. So the building would be up against the sidewalk, and any parking they put in would be in the back. So just note that.
Well, the up to 50% would be behind the building rather than in the front.
Yeah, and I looked at multiple properties where that exact scenario was happening, and it was closer to 50% that area was being used as parking. So again, I'm open to any suggestions you have.
Is that included in this proposed change? Is the building on the lot has to be up close and the parking has to be in the back, or is it just And it already is that way?
The code already requires that they build up to property line.
Okay. And then what was initially proposed was the 15% would be behind or on the side, and we
Yes.
want to possibly increase that to 50% behind
Correct.
on the side.
They would theoretically have to make the building smaller to make more parking in the back because they're restricted by the property on either side of them.
So this is a maximum, so the 50% would be, you can have up to, you could have zero if you
Yeah.
wanted to. You could cover the entire lot with a building. We're trying to discourage, this originally was trying to discourage, I'm sorry to pick out a specific product, but Moxie Java from locating on a really large lot with a lot of parking all the way around it and just a little tiny shop, right? That's not appropriate for the downtown, and so we were trying to encourage them to take up more of the property. But,
I still think 50 is too hard then, too much.
okay, and,
Up to 50.
Up to 50.
Still. Who's to decide up to?
The
Suppose,
people who are building on that lot.
exactly.
so if Moxie Java wants to build it that way and,
Well, they never would.
well, all right, but somebody else, McDonald's.
Yeah.
Burger King.
You can't have drive-throughs in a.
They don't need drive-throughs. I mean, lots of cities don't have drive-through McDonald's and Burger Kings. They're just standalone
Just
buildings,
walk
and
up.
you have to walk into them. But you can have a parking lot behind.
Economic Development recommends up to 50%.
They do. Now, after we both looked at multiple cities and how much of that lot is typically taken up in the downtowns of Caldwell, Meridian, Boise. Boise's a little bit different because of these large buildings, but in some of the older part of Boise where there's still these smaller buildings, there's still some parking back off of the alley. So, and again, I'll take whatever you recommend to city council. That was just our attempt to make it more feasible for some of these businesses.
And you say up to 50%. Who determines up to 50? The people building the building and?
Correct,
So it's nothing that we have control over, nobody else has control over.
right.
Sounds like you've done the research on this, Rodney. I'd support that.
You're gonna have to have parking for the employees. So, you know, you don't want them having to walk 2 or 3 blocks, especially in the wintertime, so.
I
I think 50%
I think
is
it's
reasonable, and I
me
think
too.
you leave it up to the people, you know, whoever's developing that lot, and I think, you know, they're smart enough to realize that they're not gonna put a 1,200 square foot building and leave 50% of the, depending on the size of the lot. I say
Right,
50%.
values of land will determine
Absolutely.
some of this.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
they're gonna be, and we're not gonna get any value for this if we're parking a car on there, then we could if we. I'm okay with the 50%,
Me too.
up to 50%.
So the current proposed code that's in your packet moves it to 50%. If there is a motion, or if you want to include something else in the motion, you're gonna have to make that statement. Okay. All right. 1022 is the parking chapter. The current code requires multifamily to provide 2 parking spaces per unit. We've had a lot of outcry from public in this room about not enough parking being provided for multifamily developments. And so we had originally come back with 3 parking spaces per unit. And that's what the commission and P&Z, or excuse me, city council generally agreed to at the workshop. However, we've had contact from developers in response to this, and they just felt that was extreme. They felt like that is way too much to require a lot of, and you've heard some of these stories saying people are moving away from having cars and, you know, less people living in an apartment or whatever. And so they felt like that was extreme. So in response to that, staff just suggested 2.5 per unit may be more appropriate, just based on those comments. So just kind of looking for your direction here too.
people talk about this, are they saying that they have 3 family members who drive a car? Or are they just saying it's a 2-family household and we want to have 3 cars, one for work for each person and then one for pleasure or for hauling the boat? Or who wants to use the 3rd space? Another driver in the household or just an extra car in the household?
Well,
Public's concern is visitors
yeah.
primarily.
Okay, well, that's a good valid point too. Even probably more so.
Yeah, if we have a multifamily unit that is, that have 2 drivers in the home, and then somebody comes to visit them, they're out of
Somebody
parking
else's parking
at
space.
that point.
Three's
Well,
three's pretty excessive.
Some
on it.
provide guest parking, right? Some projects.
They do.
And we
But
we
that's
can require
excessive
guest
of
parking.
our requirement.
Excuse me?
It's not a requirement.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
requirement is 2 per unit right now.
We can condition that?
You could condition it if it came before you for approval.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt a lot of municipalities say more than 2 per multifamily dwelling unit, plus your ADAs.
And that is true. Most do not,
Right.
most do not go that high.
This is overreaching, but,
Are they required to put ADA spots in these multifamily homes?
yeah, that's on top of the parking requirement.
Yep.
So your per unit parking
Takes out-
plus your ADAs.
So you just eliminated a bunch of space just with that.
No, you have to provide ADA.
I mean,
On
if you were
top
to
of-
add the if we were to require the 3rd spot.
That's a
it just-
lot of parking
Yeah.
for a
It's
a ton.
multifamily.
They don't have much,
100-unit complex and you want 300 parking spaces?
plus the ADA. I think that's excessive too. I mean, it's still gonna be a challenge, no matter which way you go. It's either gonna be a challenge for people who
I'd
live
rather
there and have
use-
3 drivers or 2 drivers or whatever. I mean, I got 4 drivers in my household.
I'd rather use the half a space per dwelling unit as open space than parking and amenities, but.
Yeah, if we can do it in the conditions, we can look at their plan and
Yeah, absolutely.
we can add some to it and say they gotta have this many parking spaces instead of coming up and saying, even 2.5. I mean, when you look at you look at anything of any size, you're adding a lot of parking spaces. It's gonna have to take up, that could be green space and
Yeah. So the only thing I would say against that is that some of the, let's say we have a zoned property that doesn't need to come before the commission or the city council, and just as multifamily, they'll meet the minimum, I mean, they could meet the minimum. And that maybe is a market-driven consideration that they just have to think about. But we wouldn't have a say to require additional parking if there's already a zoned property ready to develop as multifamily.
Could we do a percentage for visitor
But then you
parking?
could, but, I mean, then if the neighbors are, if the neighbors have problems, that's what you have your law enforcement for, is to enforce the codes, and if they're parking on the streets or whatever. Of course, that becomes a problem with your neighbors, but yeah,
They have to go through design review, right?
They do have to go through the design review.
So does the building department ever say you need?
So we handle design
That's a
review.
land
We
use.
staff the design review, but
Right.
design review committee has not looked at, help me out with this, Christie. They primarily looked at facade and the building rather than the site layout.
Leave that more to us.
Huh?
They leave that more to us.
That's correct.
And
Well,
we are
otherwise
going
you'd
to
be-
be changing the design review code in our next round of changes. So if parking is something that you want them to look at, we can certainly add that in. If it is already zoned RMH, they have to go to design review. Right now, when I look at a project like that, I will say to them, okay, this is the required parking, what are you doing for visitor parking? And oftentimes, just on their own, they'll come in with visitor parking, but I don't have any way of requiring that.
Can we just say staff has authority? Leave it up to you?
If you'd
You're gonna
like
need
to
more
give
wine.
me authority,
Give Christie some power.
I mean, if it's already zoned that, it would be great if we could have the design review, look at how many spaces they're allocating, and if there's not enough, you can require more, but
He'll get to this part at the end, because chapter 34 is our design review, but we did put open space requirements into design review specifically for those multifamily projects.
I just have a hard time with the requiring every multifamily to require at least 2.5 spaces per dwelling unit, because as you start to grow in sizes, you're adding a lot of parking spaces. The numbers just don't work out. I mean, to me, it gets a little crazy.
But if there isn't enough parking, I get phone calls. Just saying.
We'd like to keep you busy.
So is there a happy medium?
Well, that was a 2.5.
I still think 2.5 is too many to be required.
2.25.
There you go.
2.1.
I mean, you could do that. You could, and then we just round up, you know.
That's a 5%. If I'm doing the math, 2.1.
Increase.
5% increase over what's required.
Right.
Glad I got a finance major so I can do that math in my head.
I seen you using the calculator.
I did not. I was going to, and then I'm like, I can do that.
So
I don't know.
if you're comfortable with the 2, which was originally what was proposed, I mean, what we've had in the code, we can move forward with that. If there's still a desire, I think
This is gonna go back to council too, right?
this will go to
Council's
council.
gonna-
And quite frankly, they're the
pushing
ones that
for
are
3.
often getting this pushback. At city council, we hear it more about the parking for multifamily.
And the pushback is there's not enough?
Yeah, so what we've seen in this last year, we've had a couple of situations where a new multifamily development occurred, and across the street was a single-family development, and they were claiming that the parking, there was just not enough, and so there's parking out on the major roadway. There were reasons behind that, because part of it was construction was still going on, and so some of the parking spaces were being taken up by that. But there was a lot of people frustrated with it, and so I think that's how this came about, is that they just wanted to make sure that there's enough parking in multifamily developments.
Are you saying we could deal with 2.25 instead of 2.5?
You could do whatever you want, yeah.
Let's compromise and go that way, and then, we're heading in the right direction then, because people are complaining about it. The developers complain is too much. People who live there complain it's not enough.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like in between.
People that were complaining, they weren't complaining because the cars were parked illegally. They were just complaining
Correct.
because there were a lot of cars parked
Mhm.
around.
And there wasn't any place to park.
You gotta remember, every parking space that we make them add,
there
and
was
we
still-
want them to add more green spaces in these things. So if we require them to put in more parking, then they're gonna lose the green space, so.
And then it won't be a
Or
feasible
they're gonna,
project.
they're gonna
either,
need more
at some
land.
point.
That's what they're
Yeah,
gonna need.
parking
They need-
definitely makes a project feasible or not feasible a lot of times.
2.25 for parking and 1/4 for open space.
We just require them to build a project on top of a garage
I vote 2,
and let the numbers fall where they may.
or 2.2, something round. 2.2 is 10%.
Well, I'll just leave it off the table right now, but when you go for your motion, you're gonna have to come up with a decision there, because I think it's in the code as 2.5. Did we change it? In the proposed code?
2.5.
I
Yeah,
think it was.
2.5.
Yeah, so it's at 2.5. If you want to recommend something different than that, you're going to need to make that as part of your motion. And I'll just note it, just to bring it up at the end if you want. Okay. Variance, we had a good discussion about this, and there was some concern by, I think it was council in this situation too. They just wanted to make sure that the limited variance that is granted to me to make a decision about a variance for setbacks is for the side and the rear setbacks, not for the front setbacks. So that was made. Pretty simple change there. Chapter 25 is conditional use permits. Currently, if a CUP application is submitted with a rezone, annexation, or development agreement modification, the P and Z Commission can approve it contingent upon the approval of the city council of the other item. Our legal counsel is concerned about this because we're essentially saying you're approved for this land use. And somebody else could say no, yeah. And so what we've made, the recommendation from legal counsel is to have this wording in here that it just continues on. If it it is accompanied by an annexation, a development agreement, or a rezone, you'll do a recommendation on the city council for a CUP. That makes sense? And same thing for preliminary plats. Same exact situation. Okay, now we're in the last chapter. So that's design review and policy changes since the workshop, where the current code does not distinguish between flat and sloped roofing materials. Some common materials used for flat roofs may be high glare and not have a quality finish appearance. When used on a sloped roof, they may appear incompatible from the building facade. So we might have a really nice facade, and then the sloped roof, you can see everything on it, and it's made of a cheaper plastic material. And so staff recommended that we change that to just say, essentially say that it should not emit a lot of glare, and that it should use higher quality materials that match the exterior. Or not match, but are compatible with the exterior finishes.
Who determines that?
Design review. Mhm. And that specifically that I can't read that on mine, thermoplastic polyolefin TPO is not allowed when it can be seen. So any comment on that? Is that reasonable? Okay. I haven't had no response and no correspondence on these except for those that were received during the workshops. These are the recommended findings, and I've placed 3 different possible motions on screen.
Question, did, whatever came about with the discussion about the taco trucks?
So that, if you recall in our workshop, there was just so much
Yeah.
discussion about it and so much disagreement about it that we just felt like we better remove that from this code update and address it in another one in the future.
So you just kicked the can down the road?
We kicked the
All right.
can.
Kick the taco down the road.
And we have it already planned. We've got a list of all the things that we've got to address in more detail, but we didn't want to put the brakes on this, so. So I'd stand for questions.
No, so there were 3 changes? I mean, 3 things that we had conditions.
Yeah. I only had 2 because you
2?
agreed with one of the ones that was already a change in the code.
Up to 50% was the one that we're like, okay, that's probably good.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
The other one was
Drive-through.
drive-throughs.
And I would just remind you that there's a public hearing, so you need to open the public hearing.
Okay, we'll open public hearing. There's nobody here. Is there anybody online? Nobody
You
online?
guys don't want to testify in support of?
I entertain a motion.
So moved?
Sec-
Been moved and seconded to close public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed.
So, Madam Chair, I do have those 3 things, same as what's been mentioned. Keep the banks and the credit unions without the drive-throughs. The multifamily parking, the decision on that, how many per unit, and then the 50% in the downtown that may be up to 50%. But that one can just be left off if you want to keep it the way it is, off of the motion because it's in the proposed code.
So the parking, don't think we landed on a number.
I like 2.2.
2.2.
Yeah,
I think that's plenty.
yeah, I agree with that.
I prefer it to be less, but I mean, if it's already in a zone where she can't make any changes to it, then we're kind of, we'd be stuck with.
No city council's gonna,
What about 2.1? 5% more. 100 unit,
5%, 2.1.
that's only 5 on 100 units.
Like Jeff says, though, city council's gonna go, yeah.
Leave it at the 2.20, I think.
The way it is, just 2?
2.2.
Oh, 2.2.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I move we recommend approval to the zoning text amendment of Title 10, Planning and Zoning, Chapters 1 through 34, for formatting, clarification, ease of reference, and use and policy changes as outlined in the staff report, and the following additional conditions, the following additional conditions that, sorry, lost my notes here.
You trying to find the three things?
No, two things. That, we go back with no drive-throughs in the downtown historic zones. And that, parking in a multifamily parking in a multifamily development shall be, changed from 2.5 units per dwelling to 2.2 units per dwelling.
Second it.
That's it.
Can I just clarify a little bit more on the downtown historic drive-throughs, which also includes the banks and credit unions, because that's what they specifically wanted to exempt.
Sure.
I know that what you said means the same thing. I just wanted to put an exclamation point on it.
I'll still second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve with additional conditions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
And you have to stay and wait for Christie. She waited for you.
Tom did.
What'd I do?
You
It
second.
doesn't matter.
You did it, that's all.
Trouble anyway.
All right, are we ready? Yep. Okay, I'm going to move through this pretty quick. The action requested from you tonight is a code change in regards to e-bikes and e-scooters in the police code and in the parks code. We were approached by an e-scooter company in the fall of 2020, and we denied the contract with them based on the fact that most of council and even the Bike Ped Committee felt like the city was not quite ready for that kind of a contract yet. So we worked with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee to come up with some code language that would help us address those in the future. So the changes include definitions of what bicycles, electric scooters, and scooters are, where the prohibited areas are for riding these pieces of equipment, what the speed limit and pathway locations were where they would be allowed, and what the commercial e-scooter program would look like. So this code change aligns with our comprehensive plan. I have met with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Police Department, the Parks Department, and with legal counsel to draft the ordinance that's in your packet. And this is the conclusions of law that you will need to consider in your decision. And there was really no comment from any departments in the city. And this is your potential motion. I will stand for any questions.
Christie, I have a question. On page 40, under the definition, the last sentence says partially, is propelled by a foot pedal or sometimes by a small gasoline motor. And I see all your additions for how to change it, but I don't see that you added back anything about gasoline motor-driven bicycles, which we do have a few of them. So does that go away, or does that have to be out on the street, or what happens to those gasoline-powered bicycles?
So the gasoline-powered bicycles are going to be monitored more like a
Vehicle,
a
car.
motorbike, because they can go faster.
Sure, yeah.
So they don't really fall into the same
Yep,
category.
I agree, but I just didn't know where they went.
Yeah, they kind of went away because we don't really address motorbikes in our code either. We just
Okay.
are going to be defining anything with an engine
Should,
that
should we
over
put
so
in there
many.
then that they're considered to be motorbikes and not scooters or whatever?
I can certainly propose that to the police department to see how they'd want to define it.
I would think that it should be addressed. I mean, otherwise people just wonder what happened to it. But if you, your answer is perfect, you know, if you just say, well, we consider it to be a motorized vehicle. And just say, what do you think, officers? What do you think, Huff, Chief Huff?
Yeah, and he would answer me quickly
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
We just not allow these stupid things?
No, unfortunately, no, we can't,
we
not,
don't, so.
just
They're
not
nothing
allow
but a
them.
nuisance
Yeah, they are.
everywhere.
Which is part of the reason with the electric, that we've decided we needed to do this, because the police need a code to be able to point to if they get a complaint about a nuisance.
Yeah, and they, I mean, in my neighborhood, they don't have license plates on them, they got young kids riding them, and they're just putting down the street, and they just, you know, it's dangerous.
Can be.
Isn't there an age limit as to how young you can be to drive one of those things? I mean, these kids are 7, 8, 9 years old.
I'm not sure. I mean, we don't regulate that.
I know.
I think there's guidance on the
Yeah,
box that comes with it, but you know,
That
who
means nothing.
listens to that?
as long as you got a phone, you can ride one though.
Yeah, the e-bikes
Yeah.
and the e-scooters.
I'm talking about the gasoline ones.
Oh. Well, there are regulations against
Yeah, but
those.
those are,
It's
that's
motor
parents'
vehicle.
regulation that needs to be taken on there.
Can't regulate common sense.
I just think, you know, if we mention that to the chief, you know, they need to identify where they go.
Well, the speed limit will prevent them from being on the pathway. They can't go over 25 miles an hour.
But if they go 15, I mean, a car can go 70, but you can go 20 in the 20-mile school zones.
Then if they stay within that recommended speed limit, then they're functioning just like an e-bike would.
So the pathways, and I can't remember seeing a sign somewhere, but they usually have a sign that says no motorized
Yeah,
vehicles.
they do have those on the pathways.
They do.
So the exception would be electric e-bikes or e-scooters, and that's something to look at down the road when the company brings the scooters in though, right?
Yeah, so there's different classifications of scooters. There's a class 1, class 2, class 3, and they're all based on the level of assistance that is given. And most of them don't go over a certain speed limit. The class 3 bikes, I think, will go 50 miles an hour, but those obviously would be on the road. If they were being used at 50 miles an hour on our pathway, we'd get complaints and we'd go do something about that for sure. There aren't a lot of class 3s currently, even in the Treasure Valley. They're big bikes. So I had the definitions for class 1, class 2, class 3 in here. And then they asked me to just take it out and just kind of level it to electric bicycles, so.
Okay. Any other questions for Christie? Okay, we'll open public hearing, and anybody here want to testify? No. Okay. No.
No one online.
Somebody want to?
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed.
When a company comes in with these e-scooters, again, and we approve it, because we will at some point, I mean, it's only a matter of time, at that point, then we can regulate what type of scooter will be allowed, a Class 1 or a Class 2? Or does that have to be done here now?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kirkman, when it was proposed previously, when Bird came in and asked, Public Works was working with them on an agreement to allow them to operate within our public right-of-ways. And that agreement would be where we would place those types of
Okay.
restrictions.
Okay. And I'm just thinking, I used one of those in Boise, and we got to a certain area, and it wouldn't go over 3 miles an hour. I thought the thing was dead, and I wanted my money back. Yeah. Okay, very good. That's the point where we would, good. All right. That's what I didn't want to miss in something like this, but, all right.
That's cool.
Okay. Any other, oh, sorry. Madam Chair. I was gonna
I'm just waiting for you guys to make a motion.
move this along. All right, I'll make a motion, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we move to recommend approval of the amendment of Title VI, Police Regulations, Chapter 5, Bicycles, and Title 9, Public Ways and Property, Chapter 5, Public Parks, Section 2.E, Prohibited Acts pertaining to e-bikes and e-scooters, revising the bicycle definition and adding e-bike definition, adding e-bikes and e-scooters to the regulations, defining the locations bicycles can be ridden, stating a maximum speed, and requiring e-bikes and e-scooter providers to enter into a contractual agreement with the city before beginning operation for the city of Nampa, with whatever conditions of staff might be included.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
That motion was longer than your presentation, Chris. I don't think that wasn't lost on me.